Welcome back to Living Outside the Box. I'm really excited to say that we have with us today Larry Pratt, the Executive Director and Political Analyst of the GOA. That's the Gun Owners of America, a great organization. Larry, it is great to have you with us today. Welcome aboard. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me with you.
Yeah, our pleasure. Let's jump right in then. I want to ask you, I'm sure you've heard this before, it's a pretty broad question, but what does the Trump presidency mean for gun rights, gun owners? What's going on? Should we be excited?
Well, at a bare minimum, Trump being president means Hillary Clinton is not president. And that means we dodged a bullet. Hillary Clinton intended to push for Australian style gun control, meaning confiscation of all semi automatic firearms, pistols, shotguns, rifles. She would have been an amazing blow to the Second Amendment had she been able to carry out her wishes. Uh, so that's the minimum for the Donald Trump victory and his new administration. We're hoping that he's going to soon be able to follow through on his stated objective of signing a piece of legislation that we've been pushing for quite some time. It essentially would say that your concealed carry license should be treated the same way as your driver's license. So wherever you go in the country, it should be valid and honored.
That's the
That would
HR
be
38, right?
HR 38 is the current bill number in the House. It hasn't been introduced yet in the Senate, but that's coming soon, we think. And it would make such a huge difference. There's one person comes to mind right away is a lady, black single mom in South Philadelphia, two kids, two boys, and she had been working at a convenience store. And when she closed it at 2 in the morning, she ended up looking at the wrong end of a gun twice within a month. That prompted her to go get her own concealed carry license. Not very long after that, she didn't know a whole lot of the ins and outs of this issue, and certainly didn't know that it wasn't going to be valid from state to state. And she went into New Jersey to follow up on a job lead, and driving very, very early in the morning or late at night, if you wish. Nobody else on the Atlantic City Expressway, as she's on her way to the job interview, she's pulled over by a cop. And she knew she was driving the limit because she'd been very carefully watching that. He never issued her a citation, and yet she spent 43 days in jail because she answered truthfully when he asked, which he had no business asking, do you have a gun? If she had had the permit, the license, as per the law that's pending right now, nothing would have happened to her. She'd have been fine. Uh, so it'll make a big difference in the lives of real people who are not criminals, who are just trying to protect themselves as they go through each day.
It sounds like a great piece of legislation in that sense. Certainly would help prevent more tragic stories like what happened to that lady. Some people are going to criticize it because they might think that it gives the federal government more control, and maybe this isn't going to necessarily be bad as long as Trump's in power, but then it might be used by future regimes that would be anti-gun. What would you say to answer people like that?
This is a bill that basically, in addition to honoring the Second Amendment, telling states to honor it, is based on the Fourth Amendment, which says that states must honor the acts of other states. So that means that your concealed carry permit would be good in all the other states. It's not telling the states to do anything except not to do something. It's something that Article 4 of the Constitution does actually mandate, and what this does is execute a constitutional provision which itself is not self-executing. So I don't think we're advocating a bill that in any way does violence to the Constitution. It's language that in the Constitution that fully supports what we're trying to do It doesn't really um, mandate anything to the states except keep your hands off law-abiding gun owners.
I'm curious on the other side of the spectrum. So, if this bill gets passed, what about super anti gun, super liberal places like San Francisco, Chicago, New York City? What if they refuse to comply with it and keep arresting people anyways? And this creates some sort of a standoff or a rift between cities and states versus the federal government, who would be presumably enforcing this. I'm kind of curious because we do have a ideologically split America from the last voting results.
Arguably, that could happen. If it did, I think they probably should expect a visit from several federal marshals to execute a habeas corpus for the person they've illegally incarcerated. And I think that, they themselves would be putting themselves in jeopardy. It would likely prompt legislation that would penalize state officials who would violate this law. Right now, to my knowledge, uh, there's no penalty provisions in this law. It just simply says do it. And if they want more, I think with a President Trump, they could very likely expect to see more. Uh, it would also underscore just how anti-Second Amendment and anti-self-defense such officials are, because these are people who have a lower crime rate than the police of any particular jurisdiction. These are the choir boys and choir girls of our society, and to go after them is just adding more insult to injury.
Yeah. Also, Trump might do what he's done with, or said he's going to do with the sanctuary cities, hold back funds that would certainly get states and cities' attention. Might cause them to enforce that or for those rights to other state residents for
He
certain.
seems to get their attention. I think you're quite right, and that would be a possibility. It's not in the bill, but certainly to the extent they're getting funds from the federal government, it's always been supposed that if you take money from the feds, you kind of got to do what they say, or you lose the money.
Yeah, that's the way it goes. Getting back to Trump, his presidency, gun rights, do you think he will, or does he have any chance, or can he even repeal all of the various executive orders by Bush and Clinton and Obama? There was so many different things going on with, import bans on certain classes of guns and ammunition and all that sort of stuff. You anticipate seeing anything like that from Trump?
Our understanding is that he's got a long list, and I guess to avoid getting arthritis in his signing hand, he's not taking them all on the first day, but he's working his way through, and we obviously want to keep encouraging him to stay on that and to make sure that all of that gets done. He had said enough to make us think that that is something he's got on his agenda, and hopefully that's going to get done sooner rather than later.
And in regards to the anti side, the leftists, they don't seem to sit back and wait very long. They're always planning their next attack. So, on the national level, on the global level, in regards to the UN and treaties and all the anti gunners and leftists in this country, what are they doing right now? They must really be freaking out and trying to rally behind some new idea, right?
I don't think they're very happy right now. The United States off as a signatory for the Arms Trade Treaty and various things like that that emanate from the UN. And I'm hopeful that he's going to tell the congressional leadership that cutting the UN funding, hopefully eliminating it, is something that he will sign in a heartbeat. The UN, I think, has really pushed pretty hard. They have it coming, long overdue. And by the way, I didn't answer fully to your previous question. I would say hopefully he's going to also get behind, and I think he will, signing a measure that the Congress probably will send to him that does away with the federal imposition of gun-free zones. Principally, that would
Mm.
be schools. So there's a lot on the table, and we're hopeful that we're going to see some of that happen pretty quickly.
What about the rest of his picks, Attorney General pick, other people he's putting in position? Do you have good hopes for these picks, or are they not ideal, or what are your thoughts on that?
Now, Senator Sessions has been very supportive of the Second Amendment. I think he realizes that having a gun is not a criminal offense in and of itself. Certainly, what you do with it could be, but certainly gun ownership is something to be supported and honored in a country with a Second Amendment. So that pick was very encouraging. I don't have any inside information about who the Supreme Court nominee might be, but it's kind of a moving target. Trump's been pretty good at keeping you guessing on some of these matters. So I think, as far as we're concerned, we'll wait and see, but we would remain hopeful that he's going to choose somebody that's going to respect the Second Amendment.
Yeah, that's good to hear. It's good to hear you're positive on Sessions. On the surface, he seems like he's going to be a good pro-gun guy. It's interesting too that we have Donald Trump Jr. He seems like a pretty pro-gun guy. I watched him in an interview with a suppressor company out in Idaho. You think he's going to have much sway with his father, or maybe take on part of the Second Amendment stuff himself?
Probably both. Yes to both of those parts of your question. The family seems very tight, so I would imagine that Donald Jr. is already has already provided a shopping list of things that would be nice for Dad to do, and Donald himself is a NRA member, as a competitive shooter. He's really involved in firearms, and I think we're going to see some real interest in getting things done. We frankly we continue to be pleasantly surprised because mostly what we knew about Donald Trump was this was a guy that had given money to Hillary Clinton in the past as a New York City Democrat. He had to do that in order to be in business, frankly. And that was his claim. And we thought, well, that's a good argument, but is it true? Well, as every day goes by, I'm sure that is the case. And now that he's no longer beholden to the extortionists that run New York City, we're seeing what appears to be the real Donald Trump. And this is a guy that, whatever else he is, I don't think he's a liberal.
Yeah, it's exciting to see what he's doing. He really seems to not be holding back and jumping on top of stuff. So it's exciting times. As far as other legislation we have going, there's also the Hearing Protection Act of 2017. That's a pretty big deal. You think that's going to have a chance of actually getting through this year?
It's got a lot of congressional support. And as you indicated, Donald Jr. is an owner of who knows how many suppressors. And I'm sure, as a matter of principle, he can afford all the fees that go along with getting them. But I think, as a matter of principle, he's probably going to be very supportive. And I'm hopeful that something as simple as this measure might actually make it. The arguments are really pretty good. You look at a European country like Norway, where there's a lot of gun ownership, nothing as pervasive as the United States, but when you buy a long arm in Norway, our information is that the store will actually encourage you to buy a suppressor so that you don't annoy the neighbors. And that's, of course, the main purpose of a suppressor. And more than a sales argument, it's apparently really the way they're viewed. They're not terribly expensive when you get all the red tape taken off of them. I don't know how much it is to make a decent one, but I'm told it's a lot less than the total bottom line if you have to go through all the bureaucratic falderall.
Yeah, you look at OSHA, they require hearing protection in so many different industries, and everybody's always about protecting the end user. It just makes sense that people protect their hearing. How many deaf old guys do you see at the shooting range that can't hear anything because they damage their hearing their whole life? It's really a tragedy that
It's
they couldn't
very
afford and
important.
have silencers,
It's not a
suppressors.
it's not a frivolous argument. One of the members of our board for many years had a company that made 22 rifles, and he would test fire them with hearing protectors, and still he's got hearing aids in both ears.
Yeah, not an uncommon story. We're talking a lot about the positive things we hope to expect from Trump and all sorts of pro gun legislation and stuff like that. On a more sour note, what if things don't happen fast enough or in the right way in states? States have various bills they've passed over the last few years, especially during the Obama administration, like firearms owners protection types acts, where they basically, states like Idaho or Montana would say, we're not going to recognize any new federal laws as of now. We're doing this to protect the people. You think states are still going to be really on top of that, or do they have their guard down a little bit, or is there still that sort of states' rights mentality going strong that if Trump doesn't satisfy them, they might pass more bills like that?
Most of the states, we can think of the obvious Massachusetts, New Jersey, maybe one or two others, are really pretty much on track to keep, as we speak, a dozen states with constitutions required to carry a concealed firearm. Put it in your purse. Uh, we think that by the end of there could be 20 states that have constitutions, even be more. Bills will be introduced on success. So we could see that number of 20 maybe even grow beyond that this year. The states have been leading the way with these constitutional carry laws. A dozen at the moment have it. Could go to 20 by the end of the year. States are taking the initiative on that, and I think that's really a very, very good sign. The anti-Second Amendment, anti-self-defense people look at those constitutional carry laws, and they just can't get their heads around the fact that people might not go berserk just because they can get a gun without the government knowing about it. That they can just walk in to a store or not a store, but they could get one from their neighbor and carry it without any permission. And guess what? You know what'll happen? Nothing.
Yeah. Our people, there's so much facts and statistics and proof and evidence that more guns equals less crime. And we look at areas where guns are utterly banned for the most part, like Chicago, tons of crimes, and look at places where guns are very available and low crime. Are people, the gun owners seem to understand it, but are the other people, the anti-gunners, the liberals, or maybe the more mainstream moderate liberals, are they ever catching on? Are people ever starting to realize, or is this same old, anti-gun argument with no facts going to go on forever? When are people going to wake up?
For the moment, it would seem that the left in general, even beyond the gun issue, don't get it, that they're not absorbing any new information. They remain stuck on their old prejudices, and they just cannot fathom a world with people walking around with guns. I had a debate one time with an anti-gunner that kind of typifies what I think is a pretty general description of the pro and anti versions. I went through a number of facts and figures, and in short, I said, look, in the last 50 years, we've had of all of the mass murders that have occurred, all but 4 of them took place in a quote unquote gun-free zone, often a school, probably half the time, and you just don't find that happening in those other places. And so with that and other things making that point, the answer came back, well, I hear what you're saying, but I just don't feel safe knowing that somebody might be walking around where I am with a gun.
Comes down to feelings versus logic and
Bingo.
evidence. Yeah.
People on our side try, we don't always succeed, to think in a logical, sequential fashion. And if new facts crop up that we weren't aware of, if necessary, often enough, we will actually. The left just seems to live in a fact-free environment, and they just don't want to change their mind. It's obvious when you look at the larger picture, go beyond the gun issue just to left versus right. Look at the temper tantrum the left is still having about the election of Donald Trump.
Yeah, yeah, they're going to be having a tantrum for the next 4 to 8 years, right? Same as
It may well be.
Bush the
Yes,
first
sir.
time.
And what they don't seem to understand, parenthetically, is that the more they wet their pants and need a change of diapers, the more they're making the case that was already made that got Donald Trump elected. Uh, I think the left had as much to do with electing Trump as Donald Trump did. And if they keep acting the way they've been acting, they're almost going to guarantee his reelection.
Yeah, it makes sense. A lot of people that voted for Trump didn't necessarily vote for him because they were so much keen on Trump, but they're voting against everything that the liberals upsetted them about it. They voted against everything that they didn't like. It was just a big, in your face slap to
And that's kind
the
of,
liberals that
I'll
aren't
be
paying
honest,
attention.
that's kind of where I was because I didn't realize that Donald Trump really seems to be the kind of non-liberal, rather conservative guy who, for sure, is willing to fight. That makes him far different from all of the Republican presidential nominees we've had in just about my lifetime. Uh, can you imagine Bob Dole fighting against a Democrat? He'll fight another
No
Republican.
way.
Same with John McCain and Mitch Romney. They may be nice guys, but uh, they will only fight in a Republican primary. And then it comes to a general election, they roll over and you can rub their back or rub their belly. They're
Soft
just
and
like
weak Republican. Yeah.
pussy cats all the way. So I think Trump has indicated that it's going to be a new game. The Democrats absolutely don't know what to do with a guy who fights back and hits pretty hard. And whatever mistakes he makes and whatever things he's done that probably both of us would agree maybe he shouldn't have done or said, the bottom line is uh, he's making a difference, and the left does not know what to do with it.
Trump's a strong character and he's definitely inspiring a lot of people. Looking over to Europe,
Here and abroad, actually, by the way.
yeah,
We're going to see a lot of right of center movement in Europe, which would not have necessarily happened. But in March, there's going to be some elections in France and maybe some other countries soon thereafter. And I think generally we would expect to see right of center victories. And a lot of it, they're already talking openly. The mood has shifted because of Donald Trump.
yeah, people feel, I guess, stronger, like they have a chance to actually change things. And they had so many horrific Muslim inspired attacks over there. It was interesting to
Yes.
see that, was it the Czech president came out and basically told people, arm yourselves, defend yourselves, don't put up with any more terroristic acts in our country. So you think this might kind of spread and inspire the rest of Europe to stop being a bunch of
We,
pushovers and stand up for
I
themselves?
think maybe so. I think the Slovak Republic has seen a movement in that same direction. It seems that they've had so much terrorism rubbed right in their face that that may be why a right of center government wins in France. The right of center party in Germany is picking up steam, and Merkel could be in real trouble, even within her own party. Poland's already been right of center for some time. And so I think Europe has decided uh, it's not really nice to be killed by Muslim radicals. And probably the best way uh, to be able to stop it is to be able to shoot back while you're waiting for the police to come, if they ever do.
Yeah, I wish them the best of fortunes. Hopefully, they wise up for sure. Back to America, in regards to the average American, Joe Sixpack, likes guns, gun owner, might not be totally, spending all of his time trying to be politically savvy and understand what's going on, but just wants to make sure he can keep his rights. What should he or she be doing right now to protect their Second Amendment rights? Where should their focus be? Local level, federal level? If they only have so much time and assets to go around, where do they want to focus their attention right now, speaking to our audience?
Well, we try to answer that question with the technology that's available to us right now. If you go to gunowners.org, you can sign up for our free email alerts. And once you're at gunowners.org and do that simple thing, it takes probably less than a minute. Then when you get an email alert, it'll similarly probably take, well, less than a minute to just click, 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 and send a message off to get the resources to enable us to get into too many state fights. But we do try to keep track of at least the votes coming up on constitutional carry. And so if it's coming to your state, we'll hope to put in an attaboy to your members of the state legislature to encourage them to go in the right direction on that kind of legislation. So basically, for federal legislation, with all lack of modesty, I'd say gunowners.org is the place to be.
Yeah, you definitely have a lot of great info there. And that brings up another question. Gun Owners of America, and then there's other rights groups out there like Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership, the NRA, of course, Second Amendment Foundation. How would you rank or compare your organization versus other ones? Are you guys doing different things or overlapping in ways, or how would you explain that?
Well, we worked almost like joined at the hip with JPFO, particularly when Aaron Zellman was alive and active. We haven't been in as close a contact with JPFO recently, but we still love them. And whenever we can, we certainly want to work with them. With the NRA, there's been, as many people have been able to tell, there's been a difference in approach between NRA and GOA. And I think it helps if you just keep in mind how and why we were founded. The NRA was founded in 1870-ish by some Union officers who were very unhappy with the low level of marksmanship of the recruits coming into the Union Army. And the NRA was set up primarily to enhance civilian marksmanship training. And over the ensuing years, it did a bang-up job at training young men to be better shots and certainly know which end of the gun is which was almost a problem during the Civil War. Gun Owners of America wasn't organized until the mid-70s, and it was because the federal government, which had theretofore been working very closely with the NRA and the Second Amendment groups, started to go off the rails. And liberal politicians decided that going after guns was really going to be a great resume enhancer. And so the NRA was kind of taken aback because this was their buddy that they'd been working with for over a century, and now all of a sudden they're coming after them. And it's been a problem of cognitive dissonance. In our case, when we saw that, we were founded by a California state senator at the time and had served for over 20 years, H.L. Bill Richardson. And Richardson is, he's still with us happily, but when he was in the state Senate, he was well known for being a fighter. In fact, his nickname for some of the time he was in the Senate was Wild Bill. He would fight, sometimes more than just rhetorically, you might say. And so Gun Owners of America has always been there, as we have billed ourselves, the only no compromise gun lobby. And we have sought to keep any of that kind of making nice from happening, so that anti-gun legislation, just about always, not always, but almost always, we've been able to kill it. Once we came out of for instance, the Sandy Hook tragedy, the NRA was thinking about going along with an extension of the background check to private sales. And we said no. We were opposed to it even going into existence, let alone are we going to support seeing more of it. And for a while, it looked like it was going to pass. There was an impasse in the Senate, and we finally were able to prevail, and the NRA went along, and the thing was killed. So once they agreed that, well, maybe we got enough gun control already, then that was the final nail in the coffin of the Toomey Manchin bill that would have imposed background checks on fathers giving their sons a gun. So hopefully we're going to be able to keep making the case that the background check doesn't put anybody in jail. I think there might have been there's never been over 100 people convicted in a year for violations when 18, 20 more million people are involved in getting a background check in a year. Uh, what we ought to be focusing on is making it easier for people to have a gun with them, which is what getting rid of the gun-free zones is all about, which is why it's an important matter to make it so our concealed carry permits are portable. Oh, and by the way, I would mention that the bill that we're supporting, Mr. Sullivan of North Carolina is the chief sponsor, also says that if you come from a concealed carry state that's would be recognized as your concealed carry permit when you're in a non-constitutional carry state. So we think that's the way to handle criminals. Shoot them on the spot.
Yeah, I always got to give you credit for the purity of your organization's ideology. Again, comparing it to the NRA, lots of compromising going on, lots of softening, but you guys always stick to your guns, literally and proverbially, and protect rights. That's awesome stuff.
Well,
Really wish you the best.
and
And
well, thank you. Appreciate that. And again, let me just repeat, we're open 24/7 at gunowners.org.
yeah, that's great. We are running out of time here, so I'm going to have to wrap things up. But awesome stuff. I really, really appreciate your time today, Larry. Love
Oh,
having you on the show. If there's any other quick last minute points you want to make, feel free. But otherwise, I think we'll end this show today.
let's wrap it up. You've been excellent, and I appreciate the questions and the opportunity to get our information out. Thank you so much.